And welcome to our webinar this afternoon with us, Jurang, and Atomic Smash on how outsourcing marketing operations can drive business growth. I'll just give a couple of minutes for everyone to get logged on and to get settled. And while we'll do that, I'll introduce myself. I'm Carl Davis, Head of Business Development here at Jurang. I'll just bring to your attention, hopefully at the bottom of the screen, you can see a Q&A speech bubble. So if you've got any questions now or any crop up throughout the session, if you just want to pop them on there, towards the end, we'll go through those and hopefully give you some knowledgeable insights. Before we move on, I'll hand you over to the two guys this afternoon. I'll just go through an agenda. So next slide, Ben, if that's okay. So we'll do a brief run through of who we are at Jurang. Lukas will run through Atomic Smash. Then the main chunk of today, we'll look at reasons for outsourcing operations and how that can drive business growth. And as I said, we'll then move on to a question and answer session as well. So today's speakers, we've got Ben Hocking. He is Client Success Manager here at Jurang. And with us today from Atomic Smash is Lukas Bieler, who is Performance Consultant. Before I hand you over to Lukas, as I said, I'll just quickly give you a run through on who and what we are at Jurang. So we are an agency, marketing agency that live and breathe and we're 100% dedicated to email. We have been since 2003, where we've helped businesses across a wide range of sectors create award-winning email marketing programs to help fuel their growth and to drive revenues. We work bespoke, so we look at your marketing and business needs and how we can hone something in that fits your requirement and giving you that expertise and capacity that you need. So yeah, that's a quick run through of who we are at Jurang. Over to you, Lukas.
So we're Atomic Smash. We're a web development agency. We mainly have a focus on WordPress and WooCommerce. We've got such a focus on WooCommerce that we're one of just 3 UK Platinum certified Woo expert agencies. Our model's slightly different than what you might see from other web dev agencies. We have our trademarked always evolving model, which focuses on continuous improvement and maximizing the performance of websites. We've also got a short video to show what we're all about.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Lukas. Great to be with you today. And thank you for Carl introducing the webinar. I'm really excited for this one. So we've generally split the 6 main, we split it into 6 main points as to why outsourcing marketing operations can drive business growth. So very briefly, we'll delve into these much deeper as we go through the next 35 minutes or so. But cost savings will be the first one that we look at, then moving on to access to specialized expertise, and then scalability, increased efficiency, focusing on core competencies, and then finally having a close relationships with platforms. But we'll start with cost savings. Now, this is something I'll probably mention quite a few times as we go through the next 30 minutes or so, but none of these 6 exist within a vacuum, and there is a lot of crossover between the points. So something that I mention here in terms of cost savings might well come up a bit later on when we move on to expertise as an example. But cost savings we put first. primarily because this one is about as wide-reaching as you can possibly get. Cost savings is something that's of interest for the biggest multinationals in the world and for the smallest of startups. Regardless of where you are in your business journey, cost savings is something that a business is always interested in. How can you maximize those cost savings? I tend to think there is something of a bit of a natural hesitancy when it comes to outsourcing marketing to agencies because of perceived high costs. The reality is often the complete opposite. Not always in 100% of circumstances, but more often than not, it's actually cheaper to outsource just based on some of the adding up of smaller costs that you might not factor in. When it comes to an agency, it's probably one outgoing cost that you're looking at, but whereas internally you've got all of these smaller costs, and once you start calculating them, they soon add up to about the amount that you would be outsourcing, or even more in a lot of cases. So just to run through some of them: hiring. So think about the time and the cost in terms of writing the job description, in terms of interviewing. Potentially you've got your ideal candidate and they pull out at the last moment. You have to go back to interviewing. It's a lot of time, a lot of resource for your company. Training is another one to mention here. So as soon as the employee is started, that's time for the employee to get up to speed, but also time for other team members to go out of their way to train them up. That's again, cost, resource, all being used up. Overheads, sort of general administrative costs, office costs. The salary itself is another one. And then you always run the risk of losing the resource overnight. Appreciating there are obviously notice periods, but there's a real contrast when you're looking at it from an agency perspective. Even if someone leaves the agency itself lives on. So there's more security in that approach. And then the other thing, so there's no hiring cost for agencies. There's no training cost for agencies, although appreciating there is a bit of time to get up to speed. And there's no overheads that you have to consider. So when all of these are starting to add up, you can start to see how outsourcing can be the cheaper alternative. A few other points here. So within an agency itself, economies of scale are definitely at play. So often an agency will be looking after multiple clients within the same industry or on the same platform, or potentially that just have very similar requirements. And as a result of that, the businesses can benefit from the economies of scales and distributing how the agency can distribute costs out across its client base, which of course the business then benefits from.
Yeah, I think a lot of the tools and plugins that we work with, they have pricing that's very catered towards agencies. And if you just use them for one website, they're per website so much more expensive. And being able to buy, tools and licenses in large scale means that they very quickly become much cheaper, and we can pass those savings on to our clients.
Absolutely. Another point here in terms of cost savings. So the middle point about how, and I told you there would be crossover. This one's a crossover with expertise, but that expertise that an agency has allows for maybe stronger, more long-term solutions that maybe in the short term you won't see the cost savings, but long-term you definitely will. So if I was to provide just a random example on this, let's say you have an email marketing platform and you have your website, and you want there to be an integration where they both talk to one another. Data is being spread out across both platforms. If you're looking to set up some sort of integration, a poorer, maybe weaker solution might be able to do that in the short term, but might leave very little room for flexibility. So let's say you have a certain number of data fields that you have at the moment, but let's say in the future you're looking to evolve what you have from a data perspective. A poorer solution might not allow for that flexibility, and you might have to go back to the drawing board and build it all over again. A potentially a better long-term solution would allow for these tweaks and these tinkers with the data, again, saving you money when a year or 3 years down the line, you're looking to evolve what you've got. That's just one example. But from a solutions perspective, you always want to be looking as far into the future as you possibly can. And of course, all of the cost saving, you can reinvest that in other areas of the business, We'll go into core competencies a bit later on, but certainly where you're able to save money here and you're able to reinvest it in what you as a business do best, that's going to be beneficial. A second area we want to look at is access to specialized expertise. So there are many strands of marketing. Of course, we're bringing 2 different ones to you today, but there's plenty more that we won't touch on. But there are so many strands within those strands as well. There might be a blanket of email marketing as a term, but there's so many other smaller things that make up email marketing. And as a result of that, it's very difficult when hiring to get people who are specialized in multiple areas. There is a bit of a problem that is industry-wide where you will go towards generalization rather than specialism. It makes sense because you're not going to want them to do just one thing, you're going to want them to do multiple things. But that does mean that you will, in some instances, miss out on the best of the best. It's not feasible to hire experts from a cost perspective for every single little specialism that you need. This is where agency comes in. You can dip into the requirements as and when you need them. You might have a requirement that only exists for 1 month or one project. You can dip into that when you need it and then leave it when you don't. There's flexibility there where payroll, I guess, can't really be flexible, right?
Yeah, I mean, we always see it when we've got clients who need specific expertise for specific projects to come up with the best solution rather than the solution that a specific person can deliver. We're able to get them to have the right person to do that job, and by having a larger team at your disposal, even if it's typically only a small amount of people you regularly work with, having those other people at your disposal means that you can dip into that specialized expertise and really get someone who's able to deliver the best product.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that outsourced marketing provides those businesses with access to that diverse pool that you were mentioning there. And whether it's us and Jurang with email, or whether it's Atomic Smash and web performance, or a third agency with social media marketing, you can delve into that as and when you need it. Looking a bit more from an email perspective on this slide, when it comes to specialized expertise. So we find that the service requirement for a company can vary a great deal. So this is almost going back to the point of there being so many strands within the strands of marketing. But when it comes to email and Jurang, we specialize in build and design and data, deliverability, content, strategy, automation. There's so many different sub areas of email marketing that people within the business will have their areas of specialism. Perhaps you only need, but again, the requirement can change. So let's say you've got deliverability where you want a very specific project. You have one specific project requirement. So almost your 3 options are: number 1, have someone internally do it who's maybe not an expert in the area, which is risky. Your second option might be to hire someone, but if the requirement doesn't fill the hours in a day, then that's inefficient. And then the third option is to outsource temporarily to an expert. So the first 2 options there are far from ideal. Where we can delve into one of those areas of specialism, we can fulfill that need, whether it's short term, medium term, or long term. And working with specialists just ensures that the strategies are executed as well as they can possibly be. And I tend to think actually the external perspective is probably the key point here. I know that it's easy enough to do, not just in business, but with anything, where you look at something 100 times and you can look at it the same way because you've got your own unique perspective on what it is you're doing. Sometimes all it takes is one extra person external to yourself to review the same thing and pick up on something that you perhaps hadn't thought of or hadn't seen before, which could unlock a brand new could unlock a brand new strategy, it could be a new solution that you hadn't thought of. And of course, from an industry insights perspective, you know, an agency like Atomic Smash or an agency like Durang can offer new ideas and innovative approaches. It's within our remit to stay on top of what's going on within the industry. We dedicate the time to it in a way that it's very difficult for someone who is generalized in marketing to be able to do so. You can stay on top of the latest tech developments or the latest product developments. Just 18 months ago, Apple introduced mail privacy protection as an example, which really skewed open rates in the email industry. It was the job of Durang and any other email marketing agency to stay on top of that and to be able to communicate effectively with clients. This is the change that's coming in. This is how it will impact open rates. And here's what we recommend you do in order to mitigate that or to understand what's going on after it's come in. You know, we can stay on top, thanks to contacts and thanks to research, we can stay on top of that in a way that maybe an individual can't.
Yeah, I think to add to that, we're constantly sharing expertise internally for continuous development and learning from, you know, our various clients. It's that sort of insight that you wouldn't be able to get if you're in-house and you're only looking at the projects that you're working on. Whereas if you're agency side, then you've got so much more visibility on what approaches work and what doesn't, and then being able to share that with your clients means that they're much more likely to have an approach that's effective. And we'll get into our platform partner relationships a bit more later, but we've got those relationships with our platform partners to get better insights as to how those tools and platforms can be used, but also to get insight into what's coming further down the road in the roadmap, and being able to use that to make recommendations as to how we should approach different projects.
The third point we want to touch on is scalability. So naturally, requirement is variable, not only client to client, but indeed for client themselves. So, you know, it can be internal and external factors that are impacting how much of a requirement you have and what requirement that is. From an internal perspective, you know, the business might be in a period of growth. You know, it might be changes in personnel. What your requirement is now might not be what your requirement was 6 months ago, and equally might not be what your requirement will be in 6 months' time. Things change. So, you know, the requirement is always going to vary. And indeed, in terms of external circumstances as well, whether they're seen or unseen things. So, you know, Brexit would have been as an example of that, where something external would massively impact some businesses and the requirements they have. It could be relating to markets, and it could be related to inflation. It could be the war in Ukraine. You know, there's loads of different areas and unpredictable things that happen in the world that are external to your business that are going to impact what you internally need. And just to say that, yeah, agencies allow for that flexibility of requirement in a way that payroll can't.
Sorry, I was just going to add, I think, you know, a lot of our clients, they often increase or decrease their amount of resource with us, sort of a short notice on a month-to-month basis, related to many of the factors that Ben mentioned, or often the campaigns that they're working on. And I know that by the notice that they're giving us, that they definitely wouldn't be able to, you know, source someone else to come in to do that, whether that's hiring or a freelancer. And that flexibility to so quickly be able to say, yeah, we need an extra couple of days of resource this month or next month in order to deliver this project or to cover for this resource that we don't have internally, is definitely an amount of flexibility that you wouldn't be able to get without an agency.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I guess there's the fluctuations in seasonality as well. You know, there are plenty of businesses that have a greater marketing need in the winter compared to the summer. And that's, I guess, where the benefit of agencies come in that it generally balances itself out. If you've got a wide variety of clients on the roster or sort of in your portfolio, you then have the ability to, you'll have some that are needing more at certain times, and when they scale down, focus goes on to other clients. So yeah, it's completely understandable. We be flexible as a result of that.
Exactly. And I think I touched on freelancers a minute ago, but I think working with an agency rather than working with freelancers in order to get that flexibility and scalability gives you the sort of guarantee of quality, because you'll get someone who you've worked with before, who's worked on your account before, rather than having to sort of get one freelancer and then get a different freelancer to support them. Those people might not have worked together, they might not have worked with you before, and it's a lot easier than going through that process, and in order to sort of get that flexibility and scalability.
The next point is increased efficiency. So businesses naturally strive for the increased efficiency. Again, that one applies regardless of the size of the business, what industry you're in. Everyone is in this push to be more efficient. And tweaking processes and training staff members and investing in new tech, they're all good ideas and absolutely advisable when it comes to looking to increase efficiency later down the road. The problem is there is that initial investment of time and money that needs to take place to later on increase the efficiency. It's all quite a costly and time-intensive process.
Yeah, I mean, I think that ability for agencies to quite easily iterate and improve whilst working together internally is sort of second to none in that regard, because they're much more flexible to be able to do that, because they're not dependent on I guess the processes that you're sort of more bound to if you're client side.
Yeah, and agencies can really boast those well-established processes that come via time. It's processes, it's tools, it's workflows, and it's just cultivated over many years. So and it's refined as well through good and bad experiences. There's no point glossing over the fact that everyone's human and mistakes happen within agencies and outside of agencies. But the good thing is that when a mistake happens or something isn't as efficient as it can be in terms of a process, you're able to fix that and remedy that to the point where the same mistake doesn't happen a second time, or it is more efficient the second time that you do it. Just in terms of our a case that's relevant to us, like we have a sign-off procedure for any campaign that we do. The number of steps differs depending on what platform it is, but it can be over 40 steps. But that process has existed in some form for 20 years since the start of the company. But it's just evolved over time as platforms change and as new technologies become available to check rendering. That's where steps are introduced and removed and updated. And it's got us to the point where we are now, where it's never going to 100% eliminate human error, but it's about as close to 100% as you can possibly get as a result of putting all those steps in place.
And I think what you were saying earlier about having the sort of that expertise from constantly sort of being focused in that area gives you the ability to know when you need to, you need to change stuff because there's changes in the technology or the platform or the market, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess there's a bit of safety in sample size as well. So if you are doing just one thing and it doesn't go particularly well, it's difficult to establish, is the reason for that it's just gone wrong this one time and actually it'll be fine the second time. If we're able to see that something could be improved by doing 3 different campaigns, and in all 3 instances it could have been better by doing this one extra step, you can be more confident that yes, that is definitely something you should implement in the future. When it's related to email marketing platforms very specifically, there is a huge variety in terms of layout. So there are multiple platforms that will do roughly the same thing, but the way in which you do it is completely different. There's a great variety with platforms in terms of capabilities. So some platforms are more powerful than others, maybe relating to automation. There are some that are almost specifically built for automation when it comes to email marketing platforms. Others are still catching up. And then you've got terminology as well. So MailChimp is the biggest email marketing platform in the world. They refer to lists as audiences. As far as I'm aware, they're the only ones that do. So the point here is that when you're involved in an agency, you become aware of all of these differences to the point where you can pick them out straight away, and it's almost second nature, and you're not solving and figuring out what's different about this platform. Does this mean what I think it means? And it slows everything down. Where you're able to adapt to the platforms because you've used all of these 7 platforms regularly enough, and you know that this platform calls this and it means this, that's an increased efficiency all round.
Yeah.
Sorry, go on.
Sorry, just to add to that, like I've seen especially in the last few weeks, but over the last few months with the sunsetting of Universal Analytics, like sort of getting into the nitty-gritty and the specifics of all of the different dimensions of metrics and where they might be called something slightly different, or in cases where they're called the same thing but they mean something slightly different, is really something that if you're working client side and it's not like a core thing of your role, then it's going to be difficult to stay on top of that. And being agency side and that being sort of the main thing that you do means that you can stay on top of that and share what's important with the client, because obviously if there's so much going on, not just knowing what you need to know, but know what you don't need to know and focus on what's important is also essential if you want to save time. Yeah,
and it's a dangerous game to make assumptions if you are client side and assume that this is definitely this, because once you've made that assumption and you make decisions off the back of that assumption, and in some cases it might be wrong, then you're making ill-informed decisions. But yeah, Universal Analytics is definitely a good example of that. I won't mention it anymore, as I appreciate it makes up 110% of your life at the moment, but yeah. Focusing on core competencies is the next point here. So this one's fairly straightforward, but by allowing the specialist agencies to take on the marketing efforts, businesses can then redirect their internal resources to focus on what makes them great, hone in on why they exist in the first place. Every single business, regardless of whether small or big or up and coming, there is a reason your business exists and there's a reason why it's thriving. The more time and effort you can dedicate to that, and not, I don't want to call them distractions, but and not focusing on the other things that other people can take care of, that is going to be better for your business. So if you are able to put the marketing efforts in the trustworthy hands of someone like Atomic Smash as an example, or Jarang, then you've then got effort, whether it's what product focused, your core competency is going to be different depending on what your business is, but whether it's product focused, whether it's service focused, whether it's scale focused, whatever it might be, you're able to just dedicate more time to that.
And I guess to add to that, if you're an internal marketing team, then being able to have an agency who does the delivery for you whilst you focus on strategy allows you to stay on top of making sure that strategy works, and all your marketing activities and your channels activities are all aligned, whilst not having to actually do the delivery for all of those things, and let the people who have the expertise and delivery focus on them.
Yeah, absolutely. At that point, you're just able to play to everyone's strengths, aren't you? Because there is often a lot from an internal perspective. You have a very clear idea on strategy, and that can be implemented by other people. So you're not losing your ideas, you're not losing your overall direction. You've still got that. It's just you've got someone else in terms of the deployment and the delivery, as you mentioned, and also some of those industry insights that we mentioned earlier, just to really maximize the strategy that the client comes on board with.
And yeah, I think we alluded to this a little bit earlier, the close relationships with platforms. I think a lot of tools and platforms we work with, sometimes when there's issues, they can be difficult to get support from and get in touch with. And typically, either by having a close relationship with them or understanding how they work, how their support systems work, agencies are more quickly able to get in touch with them, and that sort of avoids having those difficult situations where you're waiting on a technical issue in the tool that's causing a delay in your whole project. And yeah, just get to the bottom of that faster.
Yeah, it's relationships with platforms can be tricky. Certainly there are time zone differences sometimes, and I think in a lot of instances as well, I'm not quite sure what the right way to phrase this is, but platforms will want to direct people to their help pages more often than contact themselves, which the better you make your support team, the more likely someone is going to rely on that over the help pages, which is less efficient for the platform. So I'm not saying there's an intentional making your contact team or your support team bad. I'm not necessarily saying that, but if they're going to dedicate their resources, it's probably going to be to the help pages where people can use their own time to help themselves rather than rely on the companies helping them. So if you know who to talk to and what to say, that can be really helpful.
Yeah, I think often you'll find that there's certain people in the support team who are better than others.
Yeah.
If you've got to get in touch with them enough times, then yeah, you'll know who to get hold of.
Absolutely, yeah, you figure it out sooner enough.
The other thing I slightly want to talk a little bit about is, as I mentioned earlier, we're one of only 3 certified platinum WooExpert agencies in the UK. And that means that our larger WooCommerce clients have the ability to join the Woo Enterprise scheme through us. And through that, they get a number of benefits. They get a dedicated customer success manager, so someone who can help them from a strategy and an escalation standpoint. They won't have to pay for the platform. There's no user limit. They'll get discounts on a number of plugins. There's access to hosting and payment services as well. So there's going for an agency has lots of great benefits there. The Woo Enterprise scheme is free, and you sort of get to choose which bits you want and which ones which you want and which you don't. So even if you don't want a customer success manager, you can still get access to the discount plugins and the no platform cost, that sort of stuff. So yeah, nothing to lose doing that either. So that's a nice bonus reason for going for an agency.
Great, thank you very much, guys. Hope, like myself, that everyone has got some insight and some further thoughts on how using an agency can really help drive and spearhead your marketing activity. We have had a couple of questions, so I'll pose this to our 2 guys now. And if you have had any crop up and you haven't put them in the box, that just stick them in now, and I'll pose them to Lukas and Ben. So the first one, how do agencies handle the onboarding experience to help get everyone up to speed?
Yeah, it's a good question, because this sort of replaces the training time that we were talking about earlier, where it's an internal hire. This is almost the substitute for that. At least from Jurang's perspective, the answer is process. So there is an onboarding process that exists within Jurang, and it's probably about ticking all the boxes. So there's a rigid structure of these are the things that we need to know before we go into a business as usual approach. And I think another important thing is using the meeting time leading up to the start of BAU as effectively as you possibly can. So there are some things that are needed, but don't necessarily require much of a discussion. It could be deliverability records, as an example. Whilst they are absolutely vital to get in place as part of an onboarding process, it's not the best use of everyone's time if that's being discussed in an onboarding kickoff meeting. It's more the qualitative things, I think, that are more useful in those sorts of meetings. This is what we like, this is what we don't like, this is what we've historically done, we've never done this, but we'd consider it. Do you have any ideas based on what we did last year? Those sorts of things I think are far more valuable when you're meeting in person, whereas there are a few more a few other things that you can probably leave to email, and just making the most out of every minute that you can in those meetings.
Yeah, I think to sort of echo a lot of what you're saying, but to put sort of a little spin on it for what it looks like from our side, it's sort of split into a very technical side and a not very technical side, with the technical side being you know, a checklist of what we need to onboard a client and have access to everything that we need to from a technical perspective, as well as sort of doing an audit of the shape their website's currently in. But then from, I guess, yeah, more qualitative perspective, it's sort of looking at understanding, you know, more about the client, their product, how they operate, what they're looking to achieve, and really working with them to make sure that our strategy that we've got for working them is the best it can be. Sort of keeping those two parts, I guess, a little bit distinct, just to make sure that they're both done in a proper way.
Great. Okay, thank you both. And then the final question for this afternoon is, what can businesses do to make the most of utilizing an agency?
Yeah, so I think in a lot of instances, whether the leading reason is time or expertise, or maybe it's a mixture of both, but you know, those are probably the two leading reasons you would use an agency. But where possible, certainly being able to trust and lean on that expertise as much as you can. So goes back to the point made earlier about getting the best of both worlds. So you've still got the client still got the understanding of the business better than anyone and has an idea on their overall strategy and overall goals. But the more you let the agency into the process, to the point where it's not a completely separate body or a separate business, but it's almost an extension of what you're doing. That for me is where it becomes most effective. Just being open to ideas, even if they're rejected, being open to the ideas, and just having the trust as soon as possible, because as soon as it feels like it is two separate organizations and it's just a point and shoot deployment from an agency side, there's less opportunity for the industry insights to make its way into strategy conversations.
Yeah, I think to echo what Ben's saying there, yeah, I think making sure that you're getting all the value out of working with the agency is making sure you're communicating everything that's going on, so they can work with you on that. I think that typically involves, you know, making the agency aware of what your medium to long term goals and strategy is, beyond just, you know, what do we need to do this month. And I think to even add on to that is getting your agencies to speak to one another. Some of the clients where we've done the best work for, we're working very closely with their other agencies, whether that's their email marketing agency, their paid media agency, or even some of their offline marketing agencies. Being able to understand what they're trying to achieve, we can work together with them for, you know, optimizing websites to their traffic, creating landing pages that are bespoke to the campaigns that they're running, gives you the best opportunity to get the most out of all the agencies you're working with. I think often that's done really well if you've got, you know, regular sort of maybe quarterly meetings where all your agencies come together and you talk strategy from a quite top level perspective, but they also, you know each other and know that they can reach out to one another to help get the best for you.
Great. Thanks very much. We have come to the end of today's session, but I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you've had some insight, as I said. If you did want to get in touch with either of the three of us, then our contact information's on there. We're more than happy to speak to you one-on-one about any pain points, any problems, any advice that we can give you. But other than that, it's just left to say thank you for joining us this afternoon, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers, everyone. Bye.